It was a typical Friday night when the call came in. We were getting complaints about a loud house party on the outskirts of town. I was partnered with Officer Davis that night, and we were tasked with checking it out. Noise complaints were routine, and usually it was just a matter of telling everyone to quiet down. We expected nothing more. As we pulled up to the house, it looked like any other party. Music blared from inside, and people were milling about on the lawn, holding red Solo cups, laughing and chatting. Davis and I exchanged a glance and stepped out of the patrol car. "All right, let's go break up the fun," Davis said with a grin. We approached the front door and knocked loudly. A guy, probably in his early 20s, answered, looking a little too enthusiastic to see us. "Hey officers, come to join the party?" he asked, smirking. "Not quite," I replied. "We've had some noise complaints. We need you to keep it down." He nodded, still smiling. "No problem, we'll turn it down a notch." We stepped inside to make sure the message was passed along. The living room was packed with people dancing and drinking, but something felt off. It wasn't the typical rowdy crowd. Everyone seemed controlled, like they were following an invisible script. As we moved deeper into the house, I noticed people giving us strange looks, whispering to each other. The music was loud, but there was an underlying tension in the air that set me on edge. "Something's not right here," Davis muttered, echoing my thoughts. We continued to the back of the house, where the music seemed to be quieter. A group of people stood in a circle, chanting softly. At first I thought it was just some drunk ritual, but as we got closer, I realized the chants were in a language I didn't recognize. "Excuse me," I said, raising my voice to be heard over the murmurs. "What's going on back here?" The chanting stopped abruptly, and all eyes turned to us. The leader, a tall man with a shaved head and piercing blue eyes, stepped forward. "Officers, is there a problem?" "We're here for a noise complaint," Davis said, his hand resting on his holster. "What's this gathering about?" The man smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Just a private celebration, nothing to worry about." I didn't believe him for a second. The air was thick with unease, and I could feel something sinister beneath the surface. "Mind if we take a look around?" I asked, already moving past him. He didn't stop me, but his eyes followed every step I took. I opened a door off the main room and found a staircase leading down to the basement. "Davis, let's check this out." We descended the stairs, and the further down we went, the stronger the sense of dread became. At the bottom, we found a large, dimly lit room. Symbols were painted on the walls in what looked like blood, and candles flickered in a circle on the floor. In the center of the circle was an altar, and on it lay a young woman, unconscious and surrounded by more people in robes, chanting. "Police, step away from her," I shouted, drawing my weapon. The robed figures turned slowly, their eyes void of any emotion. The leader from upstairs appeared at the top of the stairs, a malicious grin on his face. "You shouldn't have come down here, officers." Davis and I moved quickly, trying to get the woman off the altar. Suddenly the lights went out, plunging the room into darkness. The chanting grew louder, more urgent, and I could feel the presence of the robed figures closing in on us. "Get her out of here," I shouted to Davis, covering him as he carried the woman towards the stairs. As we made our way back up, I felt hands grabbing at me, trying to pull me back into the darkness. I fired my weapon, the flashes of light revealing glimpses of their blank, emotionless faces. We stumbled up the stairs, bursting back into the light of the main floor. The partygoers from earlier were gone, replaced by more robed figures. The house was a trap, and we were surrounded. Davis and I fought our way through, using every ounce of strength to push past the cult members. Just as we reached the front door, I felt a sharp pain in my side. I turned to see the leader, his eyes glowing with a sinister light, a knife in his hand. I kicked him away, and we burst out of the house, the woman still unconscious in Davis's arms. We radioed for immediate backup, collapsing on the lawn as the sirens wailed in the distance. Back at the station, the woman finally woke up. She was shaken but unharmed, and she provided us with horrifying details. She had been lured to the party under false pretenses, only to be drugged and prepared for some sort of ritual sacrifice. When the backup arrived, the house was empty. The cult members had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only the blood-stained symbols and the eerie sense of something unfinished. The leader's words haunted me. "You shouldn't have come down here, officers." It was as if he had wanted us to see, to understand the power they believed they held. The town of Ridley would never be the same. The house was boarded up and abandoned, but I knew that the cult was still out there, waiting for their next opportunity. And every time I passed by that house, I felt a chill, remembering the night we uncovered the dark secrets that lay hidden behind the facade of a simple house party.
It was a quiet night on patrol, the kind of night where the silence makes you question if anything ever happens in the sleepy town of Ridley. I was parked on the side of Highway 17, sipping on a lukewarm coffee, when a car sped past me, going at least 20 miles over the limit. I flipped on my lights and siren, pulled out behind the vehicle, and initiated a traffic stop. The car slowed and pulled over to the shoulder. I parked behind it, got out, and approached the driver's side. The driver, a teenage girl, looked terrified. Her hands were shaking on the steering wheel and her eyes were wide with fear. "License and registration, please," I said, trying to keep my voice calm and reassuring. She fumbled with her wallet, almost dropping it, and handed me her license. "Officer, please, I was speeding because someone was trying to kill me," she stammered. Her words caught me off guard. "What do you mean? Where are you coming from?" She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "I was at a house on Maple Street. I went there to meet someone, but it was a trap. The man, he tried to kill me. I managed to escape, but I think he's still there. He said he wouldn't let anyone leave alive." I immediately radioed for backup, giving them the address and explaining the situation. "Stay here," I told her. "We're going to investigate. You're safe now." I waited until backup arrived. 3 more patrol cars, Officers Hudson, Davis, and Miller. We briefed quickly, deciding on our approach. We had no idea what we were walking into, but the girl's fear was genuine. We arrived at the house on Maple Street, an old, dilapidated place that looked like it hadn't been cared for in years. The windows were dark, and there was an eerie stillness about it. We split into 2 teams. Hudson and I took the front, while Davis and Miller went around back. The front door was unlocked. We entered slowly, weapons drawn, scanning the rooms. The air inside was musty, and every creak of the floorboards set my nerves on edge. We cleared the first floor quickly. Living room, kitchen, dining room, nothing out of the ordinary, but the sense of dread was overwhelming. Then we heard a muffled shout from the basement. Hudson and I exchanged a glance and headed down the narrow staircase. The basement was dark, but we could see the outline of a figure in the corner, tied to a chair and struggling. As we approached, we realized it was another teenage girl, bruised and terrified. We freed her and called for an ambulance. "He's still here," she whispered. "He said he won't let anyone leave alive." Upstairs, we heard a gunshot, followed by a scream. Hudson and I raced back up, but the hallway was empty. We found Davis first, slumped against the wall, a stab wound in his side. He was barely conscious. "Watch your back," he gasped. He's like a shadow." Miller was nowhere to be found. We radioed for more backup, but communication was spotty inside the house. The tension was unbearable. We moved cautiously, every shadow and sound putting us on high alert. In one of the upstairs bedrooms, we found Miller. He was dead, a knife wound to the neck. The sight was horrific, but we couldn't afford to lose focus. The killer was still in the house, and we were his next targets. Hudson and I continued to search, our movements careful and deliberate. We finally cornered him in the attic, a gaunt man with wild eyes and a blood-stained knife. It was clear he was deranged, but he moved with an eerie calmness, almost as if he was enjoying the hunt. "Put the knife down," I shouted, aiming my gun at him. He laughed, a chilling sound that echoed in the confined space. "You think you can stop me?" he sneered. "I've been doing this for years. You have no idea how many I've killed." In that moment, I realized who we were dealing with. This was the serial killer we had been hunting for months, the one responsible for the deaths of countless teenage girls. He lunged at us, but Hudson and I fired simultaneously. He fell to the ground, finally neutralized. The relief was immense, but it was overshadowed by the loss of our fellow officers. Back at the station, we pieced together the horrific events. The girl's story had led us to a wanted serial killer who had evaded capture for years. He had lured countless girls to that house, but this time, he had made a mistake. The girl we had pulled over had been his latest intended victim, but she had escaped and led us right to him. The town of Ridley would never be the same. The bravery of that teenage girl and the sacrifice of our fellow officers would not be forgotten. We had stopped a monster, but the scars he left behind would remain forever. In the aftermath, the community came together, honoring the victims and the officers who had given their lives. And I was left with the haunting memory of that night, a reminder of the thin line between life and death, and the courage it takes to confront true evil.